Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving right into something that I know almost all of us intimately struggle with. Today, we're unpacking the reality of burnout. But more importantly, we're going to uncover how to achieve genuine slow living without having to take extreme measures, like, rage quitting your job and moving to an isolated cabin in the woods. Instead, we're going to find practical, everyday ways to reclaim our time and our sanity. So picture this. You're sitting on a beautiful beach. You are on a vacation that you have paid for, that you've looked forward to and planned for months. And yet, your brain starts chiming in, whispering, wait, shouldn't you be doing something right now? That immediate panic, that overwhelming guilt for simply being idle on your own day off is such a universally shared modern experience. We literally pay to relax, and then we just absolutely refuse to let ourselves do it.
That beach vacation panic brings us directly to a core question. Why does rest need a permission slip? As a culture, we've built up this wild idea that rest has to be fiercely earned. You need a highly justified reason just to stop moving. Rest isn't allowed to just exist on its own. It requires validation. And when you constantly feel guilty for stopping, well, that is exactly how exhaustion quietly builds in the background day after day.
We really need to reframe our everyday vocabulary here. Think about how often you say, I'm just so tired from work. It's incredibly common, but we need to use a stronger, more accurate word when it's appropriate. Being tired is the result of one bad night of sleep. Burnout, on the other hand, is something much, much deeper. It's a systemic exhaustion. It's built from constantly moving, constantly working, and constantly proving yourself until your body eventually just hits the brakes and says, enough. Calling it burnout opens the door to a real conversation and forces us to actually take it seriously. Section 1. Busyness as a shield and how we use it to mask our insecurities. So why do we push ourselves to this breaking point? Have you ever looked at a completely open weekend calendar and instead of feeling relief, you felt a massive spike of anxiety? Like, why did an empty Sunday suddenly feel like a literal threat? The source material highlights this moment of realization where having absolutely nothing to do was actually scarier than a packed, stressful day. It reveals a deeply uncomfortable truth. A lot of us don't actually know how to just be somewhere without rushing toward the next thing. And here's the brutal honesty behind that fear. An empty calendar doesn't just mean you have free time. To our anxious brains, it translates to, oh no, nobody needs me at all. We use busyness to mask our own insecurities. The logic is, if your calendar is packed, it means people need you, things depend on you, and therefore you're important. A blank schedule feels dangerously close to being obsolete. We are literally shielding our own self-worth with a wall of never-ending tasks. Moving to Section 2. The slow living fantasy versus the reality. We see the cultural counter-movement to toxic productivity everywhere, but there's a huge disconnect. Look at this comparison. On one side, we have fantasy slow living, the version highly romanticized on social media. It looks like abandoning your life, moving to a remote cabin, pouring your morning coffee in cinematic slow motion, and magically having zero bills. On the other side is realistic slow living. It has to fit around demanding jobs, stressful commutes, kids, debt, and phones that absolutely never stop buzzing. The social media fantasy is visually stunning, sure, but it completely alienates the busy people who actually need the relief the most. We also have to acknowledge a critical caveat here, perfectly captured by this quote from our source material. Preaching slow living as a simple, universal choice can be incredibly tone-deaf. For someone working 2 jobs just to survive, telling them to simply slow down and be present ignores their reality. Not everyone has equal access to slowness. For many, life makes the choices for them, in the form of mandatory overtime and rising rent. It's vital we recognize that true, unstructured slowness can be a huge privilege. So if we aren't going to quit everything, and if we acknowledge the heavy responsibilities most adults carry, we arrive at the pivotal question of this explainer. Can slowness actually exist inside a normal, chaotic, busy life? How do you stop the internal rushing when you literally cannot abandon your external responsibilities? Which brings us to Section 3, the power of micro moments and finding small pockets of peace. This is where we find our actionable solutions. To master these micro moments, we first need to understand intentionality. Being intentional simply means doing something on purpose, with your full attention, instead of just letting it happen automatically. We spend so much of our busy lives on pure autopilot, just checking boxes. Intentionality is the foundational concept for creating realistic pockets of peace. It's stepping out of autopilot, even if it's literally just for a few minutes.
Let's see how this builds in a real-world scenario with the phone-free dinner experiment. The goal was super simple: eat one dinner without a phone. The reality? The first 2 minutes were spent instinctively and almost comically reaching for a phone out of sheer habit, even though it wasn't there. It wasn't until minute 3 that the food was actually tasted and noticed. It's a little sad that just noticing your own dinner is considered a big event, but it highlights exactly how deeply ingrained our auto-palate rushing really is. But here is the beautiful climax of that dinner experiment. By eating intentionally, no extra time was taken. It was the exact same 20 minutes it would have been anyway. No incredible productivity was gained, and 0 tasks were checked off a list. But time actually stretched a little. The 20 minutes genuinely felt longer in a remarkably good way. This brings us to some highly doable, actionable, intentional minutes. You do not need a farm to do these. It could be one dinner a week without your phone. It could be a simple 5-minute walk to the bus stop. Instead of rushing with your screen out, you actually look up and notice your surroundings. It could be taking just 15 minutes to genuinely savor a cup of coffee, or having one quiet morning just once in a while. It's small, it's doable, it's a tiny pocket of time where you flat out refuse to rush to the next thing. The crucial realization is this: it's not about having more time. It is all about how the time feels while you're actually in it. You don't need to completely overhaul your reality or buy a new life to escape burnout. You just need to fundamentally shift your experience of the time you already possess. I absolutely love how this source frames this. It's a few honest minutes inside the busy one you already have. That is what real slow living looks like for functioning adults. It's going from panicking on a free Sunday to simply eating dinner slowly twice a week. That might not look super dramatic on social media, but man, that represents massive, genuine growth. It totally validates that small steps are entirely enough to start breaking the cycle of burnout. Which leaves us with this final vital question to close out our explainer. Where are you going to find your honest minutes today? Look at your busy, chaotic, demanding schedule. You can't change the whole thing, but you can absolutely claim a tiny pocket of it. Will it be the walk to the car? That very first sip of coffee? Find those minutes, step off autopilot, and just be there. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Now go out there and stretch your time just a little bit.